The morning sun cast long shadows across Beijing's government district as Minister Wang Shaoli adjusted his tie and prepared for what would become one of the most controversial announcements in modern diplomatic history. Inside the imposing walls of the Ministry of Public Security, teams of engineers and cryptographers had been working in secret for 3 years on a project that would change international travel forever. The Advanced Encryption Standard Passport, or AES passport as it came to be known, was China's answer to growing concerns about document forgery and identity theft in an increasingly digital world. But what started as a security measure would soon spark heated debates in capitals around the globe. Dr. Chen Wei, the lead engineer on the project, remembers the excitement in the room when they first successfully tested the prototype. The passport looked ordinary from the outside, a familiar burgundy cover with gold lettering. But hidden within its pages was technology so advanced that it could store and encrypt personal data in ways never seen before. The chip embedded in the document could hold not just basic information like name and date of birth, but also biometric data, travel history, financial records, and even social media activity. The idea had emerged from China's broader push toward digital governance and social monitoring. Government officials argued that traditional passports were becoming obsolete in an age of sophisticated cyber threats and international crime. They pointed to cases of terrorists using fake documents and criminals exploiting weaknesses in existing passport systems. The AES passport, they claimed, would make such activities nearly impossible. But the project faced internal resistance from the beginning. Some government advisors worried about the international reaction, while others questioned whether citizens would accept such extensive data collection. These concerns were often dismissed in meetings, with officials emphasizing national security and the need to stay ahead of other countries in technological development. The technology itself was impressive by any measure. Each passport contained a specialized chip capable of 256-bit encryption, making it virtually impossible to hack or duplicate. The data was stored across multiple secure servers with access controlled by sophisticated algorithms that could verify a person's identity in seconds. When scanned at airports or border crossings, the passport would transmit encrypted information that could be instantly verified against government databases. For the engineers working on the project, it represented the pinnacle of their careers. They had solved complex technical challenges and created something that could revolutionize not just travel, but identity verification in general. The team worked long hours, often staying in the office until midnight, driven by the belief that they were creating something historic. However, what they didn't fully anticipate was how the rest of the world would react to their innovation. The first hints of trouble came during quiet diplomatic meetings, where foreign ambassadors expressed concern about the implications of such detailed data collection. These early warnings were largely ignored by Chinese officials, who remained confident that the benefits would outweigh any diplomatic costs. As the project neared completion, excitement within the ministry reached fever pitch. Test runs had exceeded expectations, with the system processing identity verifications 90% faster than traditional methods. The security features had proven unbreachable in multiple tests, and the user interface was surprisingly simple, despite the complex technology underneath. The decision to announce the program publicly came after months of internal debate. Some advisors suggested a gradual rollout, starting with government officials and business travelers. Others pushed for a bold announcement that would position China as a global leader in secure identification technology. In the end, the latter group prevailed, setting the stage for an international controversy that would dominate headlines for months. Minister Wang had been chosen to make the announcement because of his reputation for clear communication and his background in both technology and diplomacy. As he reviewed his notes one final time, he felt confident that the world would recognize the AES passport as a breakthrough in security and convenience. The reality, however, would prove far more complicated than anyone in that Beijing office building had imagined. The press conference room at the Beijing International Hotel buzzed with anticipation as journalists from around the world gathered for what had been described only as a major security announcement. Foreign correspondents sat alongside Chinese media representatives, their cameras and recording equipment creating a forest of technology aimed at the podium where Minister Wang would soon make history. When Wang stepped up to the microphone at exactly 2 p.m., the room fell silent. His opening words were measured and confident. Today, China takes a revolutionary step forward in protecting our citizens and ensuring global security, he began, his voice carrying clearly across the packed room. We are proud to introduce the world's first advanced encryption standard passport system. The demonstration that followed was carefully choreographed. A volunteer from the audience, a Chinese businessman named Liu Ming, was asked to approach a special scanning station that had been set up on stage. When Liu placed his new AES passport on the scanner, a large screen displayed his information in real time. Not just his name and photo, but his travel history, employment verification, and even health status. The process took less than 5 seconds. The room erupted with questions before Wang had even finished his presentation. Sarah Henderson, a reporter from the BBC, was among the first to speak. Minister Wang, what personal information is actually stored on these passports? She asked, her voice cutting through the noise. Wang's answer would later be analyzed and debated by privacy experts worldwide. The passport contains only information necessary for security and identity verification, he replied. This includes biographical data, biometric identifiers, and relevant travel and background information. That phrase, relevant travel and background information, would become the focus of intense scrutiny in the days that followed. Privacy advocates immediately demanded specifics about what constituted relevant information and how it would be collected and used. The Chinese government's initial responses were vague, leading to growing suspicion about the true extent of the data collection. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a cybersecurity expert at Cambridge University, who was following the announcement online, immediately began analyzing the technical specifications that China had released. What she found alarmed her. The storage capacity of the chips was far greater than needed for basic passport information, suggesting the system could hold extensive personal data. Her preliminary analysis, published on her blog within hours of the announcement, raised questions that would dominate international discussions for weeks. The immediate reaction from other governments was mixed, but increasingly concerned. The United States State Department issued a statement calling for transparency and respect for privacy rights in any new identification system. The European Union announced it would carefully review the implications of this technology for data protection and privacy. Even some of China's closest allies expressed private reservations about the scope of the program. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, ordinary Chinese citizens were having their first encounters with the AES passport application process. Li Wei, a software engineer planning a business trip to Singapore, was among the early applicants. The process was more extensive than he had expected. Beyond the usual forms and photos, he was required to provide access to his social media accounts, employment records, and financial information. They said it was for security verification, Li later explained to reporters, but it felt like they wanted to know everything about my life. The application centers themselves were impressive facilities, equipped with advanced biometric scanners that could capture not just fingerprints and photos, but also iris patterns, voice prints, and even walking gait analysis. Citizens reported that the entire process took several hours, much longer than traditional passport applications. Some described feeling uncomfortable with the level of personal information being collected, but most accepted it as a necessary step for enhanced security. International airlines began expressing concerns about the new system almost immediately. James Rodriguez, a spokesperson for the International Air Transport Association, warned that the AES passports could create significant delays at international airports if other countries required additional verification procedures. We're looking at potential compatibility, issues that could affect millions of travelers, he stated in a press release issued just 2 days after the announcement as news of the AES passport spread through social media and international news outlets. The story began taking on a life of its own. Privacy activists organized online campaigns calling for boycotts of Chinese tourism. Technology bloggers debated the security implications of such extensive data collection. Immigration lawyers warned their clients about potential complications when traveling with the new documents. The Chinese government, perhaps surprised by the intensity of the international reaction, began a concerted public relations campaign to address concerns. Officials appeared on international news programs, wrote opinion pieces for major newspapers, and organized technical briefings for foreign diplomats. But with each explanation, new questions arose about the true capabilities and intentions behind the AES passport system. Within 2 weeks of the announcement, the first major diplomatic crisis erupted when Maria Gonzalez, a Spanish journalist, attempted to enter China with a traditional passport to report on the AES system. Despite having a valid visa, she was detained at Beijing Capital Airport for nearly 8 hours. Chinese immigration officials insisted that all foreign journalists covering the AES passport story must undergo additional security screening, effectively creating a new requirement that hadn't been announced publicly. The Spanish embassy immediately lodged a formal protest, and the incident made international headlines. Maria later described her experience to reporters from her hotel room in Beijing. "They kept asking me about my previous articles on China, my sources, and my intentions for this story," she said, clearly shaken by the ordeal. "It felt like they were testing their new system on me, even though I didn't have an AES passport." The detention sparked outrage among international press freedom organizations. The Committee to Protect Journalists issued a strongly worded statement condemning what they called the weaponization of passport technology against media freedom. Other countries began warning their citizens about potential complications when traveling to China, leading to a noticeable drop in tourism bookings. Dr. Michael Chen, a Chinese-American computer scientist at Stanford University, had been watching the controversy unfold with growing concern. As someone who regularly traveled between the United States and China for academic conferences, he decided to investigate the technical aspects of the AES passport more thoroughly. What he discovered through his research would add another layer to the international debate. Using publicly available technical specifications, Dr. Chen determined that the AES passport system could potentially be used for real-time location tracking. The chips contained GPS capabilities that could be activated remotely, theoretically allowing the Chinese government to monitor the movements of passport holders anywhere in the world. When he published his findings in a respected cybersecurity journal, the implications sent shockwaves through the international community. "This isn't just about data collection," Dr. Chen explained in an interview with the New York Times. "This technology could turn every Chinese passport into a tracking device. The privacy implications are staggering." His analysis suggested that the system was far more sophisticated than China had initially revealed, with capabilities that extended well beyond simple identity verification. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, democracy activists were expressing serious concerns about the AES passport program. Wang Ka-ming, a prominent pro-democracy leader, pointed out that Hong Kong residents would likely be required to adopt the new system despite their special administrative status. "This represents another erosion of the one country, two systems principle," he argued at a packed press conference. Beijing is using technology to extend its surveillance capabilities over Hong Kong citizens. The Hong Kong government, caught between Beijing's directives and local opposition, tried to reassure residents that their privacy would be protected. However, leaked internal documents suggested that Hong Kong's immigration system would be fully integrated with the mainland Chinese database, giving Beijing access to detailed information about Hong Kong, residents' travel patterns, and personal data. International business communities were also growing, concerned about the implications of the AES passport system. Robert Thompson, CEO of a major multinational consulting firm, worried about how the new technology might affect his company's operations in China. "We have hundreds of employees who travel regularly between our offices in Shanghai and our headquarters in London," he explained. "If China can track their movements and access their personal data, that raises serious questions about corporate privacy and intellectual property protection." The European Union, which had initially taken a cautious wait-and-see approach, began developing a more aggressive response. European Parliament members started drafting legislation that would require additional security screening for travelers carrying AES passports. The proposal, if implemented, would effectively create a two-tier system for Chinese travelers, potentially leading to significant delays and complications at European airports. At the same time, Cybersecurity experts around the world were conducting their own analyses of the AES passport technology. A team of researchers at MIT published a paper suggesting that the encryption system, while sophisticated, contained potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by skilled hackers. Their findings raised the possibility that the extensive personal data stored on AES passports could be compromised, potentially exposing millions of Chinese citizens to identity theft and other cybercrimes. The Chinese government responded to these criticisms with a mixture of dismissal and counter-accusations. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian accused Western countries of discriminatory practices and technological protectionism. He argued that the criticism of the AES passport system was motivated by jealousy over China's technological achievements rather than legitimate privacy concerns. As the controversy deepened, individual stories began emerging that illustrated the human impact of the AES passport system. Zhang Mei, a Chinese graduate student at Oxford University, found herself unable to renew her traditional passport and was forced to obtain an AES passport to maintain her student status. The process required her to provide extensive information about her academic research, her professors, and her social connections in the UK. I felt like I was being interrogated rather than applying for a travel document, she later told human rights organizations. The situation escalated dramatically when tech entrepreneur David Kim arrived at Los Angeles International Airport with his new AES passport. As a Korean-American businessman who had lived in Shanghai for 5 years, David thought the transition to the new system would be routine. Instead, he found himself at the center of an international incident that would reshape how countries handle the Chinese passport controversy. U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents detained David for 6 hours, during which they attempted to access the data on his AES passport using specialized scanning equipment. When the passport security systems detected unauthorized access attempts, it triggered an automatic lockout that rendered the document temporarily invalid. David was stuck in legal limbo, unable to enter the United States with his locked passport, but also unable to return to China without proper documentation. "I've never felt so helpless," David later recounted to CNN. "I was treated like a criminal just because I had this new passport. The agents kept saying they needed to verify my identity, but their scanners couldn't read the chip properly. I spent the night in an airport holding room, wondering if I'd ever get home." His case highlighted the technical incompatibilities between the AES passport system and existing border control technologies around the world. The incident prompted an emergency meeting between U.S. and Chinese diplomatic officials. Within 48 hours, both countries had assembled technical teams to address the compatibility issues, but the damage to Chinese-American relations was already apparent. Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, called for hearings on the security implications of the AES passport system. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Dr. Klaus Müller was conducting the most comprehensive independent analysis of the AES passport technology to date. As the former head of cybersecurity for the German government, Dr. Müller had access to sophisticated testing equipment and a team of expert cryptographers. His investigation would reveal capabilities in the AES passport that China had never publicly acknowledged. "What we discovered was extraordinary," Dr. Müller explained in his classified report to European Union officials. "These passports don't just store data, they actively communicate with nearby devices and networks. They can update their information in real time and potentially transmit location data without the holder's knowledge." The implications were staggering. Every Chinese citizen carrying an AES passport could theoretically be monitored continuously, wherever they traveled. The technical revelations led to a coordinated response from European intelligence agencies. France, Germany, and the United Kingdom jointly announced that they would require additional security protocols for all AES passport holders entering their countries. The new procedures included mandatory declaration of electronic devices, restrictions on certain types of business meetings, and enhanced background checks for long-term visitors. Back in China, the government was struggling to manage the growing international backlash while maintaining domestic support for the program. State media launched an aggressive campaign portraying the foreign criticism as evidence of Western prejudice against Chinese technological advancement. News programs featured interviews with citizens praising the convenience and security of their new AES passports, though these reports conspicuously avoided mentioning the international complications. Liu Xiaoping, a factory manager from Guangzhou, represented the mixed feelings many Chinese citizens had about the program. "I like that my passport is more secure," he told a state television reporter, "but I'm worried about traveling overseas for business. My company does a lot of work with European clients, and now they're asking questions about whether I can still visit their offices." His concerns reflected a growing awareness among ordinary Chinese citizens that their new passports might actually limit their international mobility rather than enhance it. The business implications were becoming increasingly serious. Major international companies with operations in China began reporting difficulties with employee transfers and business travel. Emma Richardson, the Asia-Pacific director for a British manufacturing company, had to postpone a crucial project meeting in London because 3 of her Chinese colleagues were denied expedited visa processing due to concerns about their AES passports were essentially being penalized for complying with Chinese law, Emma explained to the Financial Times. "Our Chinese staff are required to have AES passports, but other countries are treating these documents as potential security threats. It's creating impossible situations for international business," her company began, exploring options to relocate critical operations outside of China to avoid future complications. The situation became even more complex when cybersecurity researchers discovered that the AES passport system was collecting data far beyond what Chinese authorities had disclosed. Dr. Sarah Kim, a privacy advocate at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, obtained leaked technical documentation showing that the passports recorded detailed information about every device they came into contact with, including smartphones, laptops, and even smart home systems. This means that Chinese passport holders are unknowingly creating detailed maps of the electronic infrastructure in every country they visit, Dr. Kim explained in a widely shared blog post. Whether intentional or not, this system is effectively conducting mass surveillance on a global scale. Her revelations prompted several countries to consider complete bans on AES passport entry, a move that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. The human cost of these developments was becoming increasingly apparent. Chen Wei, a Chinese doctoral student at Cambridge University, found his academic career in jeopardy when his research supervisor expressed concerns about security clearances and data protection. "I'm being punished for something my government decided to do," Chen said in an emotional interview with The Guardian. "I didn't choose to have an AES passport, but now it's affecting every aspect of my life abroad." The breaking point came during the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, when Chinese delegation members carrying AES passports triggered a security alert that shut down the entire conference center for 3 hours. The incident began when Swiss security scanners detected unusual electromagnetic emissions from the Chinese delegates' documents, prompting an immediate evacuation of the building and the deployment of bomb disposal experts. Wang Jianwei, China's Deputy Minister of Commerce, was among the delegates affected by the evacuation. Later, he would describe the experience as deeply humiliating. "We were treated like terrorists," he said in an interview with Chinese state media. "Security personnel surrounded us with weapons drawn, all because our passports were too advanced for their primitive scanning systems." The incident was broadcast live on international television, creating a diplomatic crisis that reached the highest levels of government. Swiss authorities later determined that the AES passports were automatically attempting to connect to local networks and update their stored data, a feature that Chinese officials had never publicly disclosed. The discovery that the passports were actively seeking network connections without their holders' knowledge sparked immediate demands for explanations from the Chinese government. Dr. James Patterson, a former NSA cryptographer who had been monitoring the AES passport situation, published an explosive analysis of the Davos incident. His research suggested that the passports were not only collecting data, but also attempting to transmit information to servers in China whenever they detected internet connectivity. "This isn't passive data storage," he wrote in a report that was immediately classified by several intelligence agencies. "These documents are functioning as active intelligence gathering devices." The revelation led to emergency sessions at the United Nations, where representatives from over 30 countries demanded immediate answers from China about the true capabilities of the AES passport system. Ambassador Chen Lu, China's permanent representative to the UN, found herself defending a program that even she didn't fully understand. Internal diplomatic cables later revealed that Chinese diplomats around the world were struggling to explain technical capabilities that their own government had never fully disclosed to them. Meanwhile, ordinary Chinese citizens were beginning to face real consequences for their government's technological ambitions. Li Hua, a travel blogger with over 1 million followers, had built her career on international travel content. But after obtaining an AES passport, she found herself unable to enter 12 different countries due to security concerns. "My entire livelihood depends on travel," she explained in a viral video post. "But now I'm essentially trapped because of this passport system I never asked for." The economic impact was becoming impossible to ignore. Tourism from China to European destinations dropped by 40% within 3 months of the AES passport introduction. Major airlines began canceling routes between China and several international destinations due to reduced demand and increased security complications. The Shanghai Stock Exchange saw significant declines in travel and tourism-related companies as investors worried about the long-term implications of the passport controversy. In Silicon Valley, tech companies that had previously been eager to collaborate with Chinese firms began implementing new security protocols that effectively banned AES passport holders from their facilities. Jennifer Walsh, the cybersecurity expert, whose early analysis had warned of the passport's capabilities, was now consulting with major technology companies on how to protect their intellectual property from potential data collection. Through the AES system, we're seeing a fundamental shift in how the global community views Chinese technology, Dr. Walsh explained to a packed auditorium at Stanford University. The AES passport has become a symbol of fears about surveillance and data collection. Whether those fears are justified or not, they're reshaping international relationships in ways we're only beginning to understand. The situation reached a new level of complexity when researchers at Oxford University discovered that AES passports could potentially interfere with medical devices. Dr. Rachel Thompson, a cardiologist, published a case study describing how a patient's pacemaker experienced irregular readings whenever AES passport holders were nearby. While the connection was not definitively proven, the possibility that the passports could affect critical medical equipment added another dimension to the growing controversy. Chinese scientists and engineers who had worked on the AES passport project began speaking out anonymously about their concerns. One former team member, using the pseudonym Deep Chip, leaked technical documents to journalists showing that the passport system had capabilities far beyond what the government had ever intended to reveal. The documents suggested that the data collection features had been designed to be far more extensive than necessary for passport functionality. "We created a monster," Deep Chip wrote in an encrypted message to the Washington Post. "What started as a security improvement became a surveillance system that even we didn't fully understand." The political pressure to add more and more features meant that we lost sight of the original purpose. Now the whole world sees China as a threat because of our creation. The leaked documents revealed that the AES passport system was connected to China's broader social credit system, automatically updating citizens' scores based on their travel patterns, the people they met, and even the websites they visited while abroad. This connection had never been publicly acknowledged, and its revelation sparked outrage among privacy advocates worldwide. As international pressure mounted, some countries began taking more drastic measures. Australia announced a complete suspension of tourist visas for AES passport holders, while Canada implemented a requirement that Chinese visitors surrender their passports for security analysis upon arrival. These measures effectively created a two-class system for international travel, with AES passport holders facing restrictions and delays that other travelers didn't experience. 6 months after the initial announcement, President Xi Jinping faced the most serious diplomatic crisis of his tenure, as world leaders gathered in emergency session to address what had become known as the AES crisis. The virtual summit, hosted by the United Nations, brought together representatives from 45 countries to discuss coordinated responses to China's passport system and its implications for global security and privacy. The Chinese delegation, led by Foreign Minister Wang Yi, entered the virtual meeting knowing they were fighting for China's international reputation. Intelligence reports had revealed that several countries were preparing to implement complete travel bans for AES passport holders, a move that would effectively isolate China from the global community in ways not seen since the Cold War. "We stand at a crossroads," President Biden declared in his opening remarks to the summit. "We must decide whether we will accept a world where travel documents become tools of mass surveillance, or whether we will stand together to protect the privacy and freedom of movement that form the foundation of international cooperation." His words set the tone for discussions that would reshape international relations for years to come. Behind the scenes, Chinese officials were scrambling to address the technical and political fallout from the AES passport program. Internal communications, later leaked to journalists, revealed deep divisions within the Chinese government about how to proceed. Some officials advocated for complete transparency about the system's capabilities, while others pushed for defiant resistance to international pressure. Dr. Chen Wei, the original architect of the AES passport system, found himself at the center of a storm he had never anticipated. In a secret testimony to Chinese legislators, he admitted that the project had evolved far beyond its original scope. "We were asked to add features continuously," he explained, according to leaked transcripts. "Each addition seemed reasonable at the time, but together they created something that even I don't fully understand anymore." The human impact of the crisis was becoming increasingly tragic. Families were being separated as immigration restrictions made it nearly impossible for Chinese citizens to visit relatives abroad. Wang Mei, a 67-year-old grandmother in Beijing, had been planning to attend her granddaughter's wedding in Toronto. Despite having a valid visa, she was denied entry to Canada solely because of her AES passport. "I just want to see my family," she told reporters through tears. "I don't understand why my passport has become a political weapon." Meanwhile, the international business community was adapting to a new reality where Chinese participation in global commerce was increasingly complicated. The World Trade Organization reported a 25% decline in business travel between China and other major economies. Major conferences and trade shows began offering virtual alternatives specifically to accommodate Chinese participants who could no longer travel internationally. The turning point came when a coalition of human rights organizations led by Amnesty International filed a complaint with the International Court of Justice alleging that the AES passport system constituted a violation of fundamental human rights. The complaint argued that the system infringed on freedom of movement, privacy, and association on an unprecedented scale. Sarah Chen, a Chinese-American human rights lawyer who helped draft the complaint, explained its significance. "This isn't just about passports anymore. It's about whether we'll accept a world where governments can monitor and control their citizens wherever they go." The AES passport system represents a fundamental threat to human freedom that extends far beyond China's borders. The legal challenge forced China to make its first major concession since the crisis began. In a surprise announcement, the Chinese government agreed to establish an international oversight committee with access to the technical specifications of the AES passport system. The committee would include cybersecurity experts, privacy advocates, and diplomatic representatives from multiple countries. However, the damage to China's international reputation was already severe. Opinion polls showed that trust in Chinese technology had plummeted worldwide, with many consumers and governments becoming reluctant to adopt Chinese digital systems of any kind. The AES passport crisis had become a symbol of broader concerns about China's approach to technology and surveillance. As the one-year anniversary of the AES passport announcement approached, the system remained largely unchanged, but the world around it had transformed dramatically. New international protocols required enhanced screening for AES passport holders at borders worldwide. Several countries had established specialized processing centers to handle the unique security concerns posed by the Chinese documents. The crisis also sparked innovation in privacy-protecting technologies. Companies around the world began developing privacy shields and detection devices to help people protect themselves from unwanted data collection. The market for privacy-focused technology exploded as consumers became increasingly aware of how their personal information could be gathered and used without their knowledge. Looking back, Many experts would later identify the AES passport crisis as a watershed moment in international relations, the point when the world fully recognized the implications of advanced surveillance technology. It forced difficult conversations about privacy, security, and the role of technology in government control that would continue for decades. The Chinese citizens caught in the middle of this global controversy adapted as best they could. Some chose to limit their international travel, rather than face the complications of carrying an AES passport. Others became advocates for privacy rights, using their experiences to highlight the human cost of surveillance technology. Their stories served as powerful reminders that behind every technological system are real people whose lives are affected, in ways that policymakers often fail to consider. The AES passport story ultimately became a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of technological advancement without adequate consideration of privacy rights and international cooperation. It demonstrated how quickly a security innovation could become a diplomatic disaster, reshaping global relationships and forcing difficult questions about the balance between safety and freedom in an increasingly connected world.